willing to do the job that the people of America sent them here to do. So as we continue through this discussion tonight, we need to focus on the tardy 22, the bills that have yet to be voted on by the Senate. I thank my friend from Colorado for having this hour tonight, and with that I yield back.
Well, I thank both the gentlelady from Alabama and the gentleman from Illinois who rightfully pointed out that with the addition of the bills that passed the House just today, we have added to the forgotten 15 bills that are creating jobs that have passed the House, many with strong bipartisan support, that number now reaching 22. The bills that would create thousands and thousands of jobs around the country, recognized by people on both sides of the aisle as bills that would do what it takes to create jobs in this country. And I would yield to the gentleman from New York.
Thank you. I so appreciate the gentleman yielding and for taking the leadership role, putting this hour together, and joining my fellow freshman members on the floor of the House to talk about the #1 issue of the day, and that is our economy. That is jobs. And I come down here tonight to join my colleagues and to tell the American people that we here in the House of Representatives are going to be open and honest and push forward an agenda that relies on the private sector being that primary engine that creates the economic environment so that people, hardworking Americans, hardworking taxpayers, have the opportunity to take care of their children for generations to come by having a good, solid job. You know, I'm looking at the vote tally from tonight's 2 votes that we took just moments ago that added to the forgotten 15, the last 2 of the tardy 22. And you look at the numbers. On passage on each vote, on each bill, it was 407 to 17. It was 413 to 11. That is almost an unbelievable percentage of bipartisan support in the House of Representatives for 2 bills that are going to create a stronger private sector America so that we can put people back to work. And yet, we continue to engage in partisan politics in the Senate, and we don't even allow these bills to have a vote on the floor of the Senate, at least to be debated, and an open and honest debate and argument about their merits be heard by all Americans, just like we do here in the House of Representatives on the floor of the House. You know, it's interesting. I listened to the President as he goes around and he's promoting his Jobs Act bill. And, you know, I would say that I clearly have an impression that the President's concerned about his job, but is he really concerned about your job? Because he's spending an inordinate amount of time going around this country rather than coming here to Washington, working with us in the House, working with the members in his own party in the Senate to say, take up at these bills, have an honest debate. Send them over. If they strengthen the private sector of America like almost essentially all of our colleagues here in the House agreed tonight would do by passing and supporting these bills with the numbers that we see, have that debate in the Senate and move forward. You know, we're going to stand and we're going to continue to work for hardworking taxpayers here in the House of Representatives. And I know my colleagues share in that sentiment, because that's what we came to Washington to do. We came to Washington as freshman members of Congress not to engage in politics, not to engage in partisan debates, but to talk about fundamental policy issues that are going to move us forward as a nation so that we can have the great experience that we've all enjoyed, the opportunities that we've all enjoyed, so that all of our fellow Americans can give that opportunity not only to themselves, but to their kids, to their brothers, their sisters, so everybody in this nation can enjoy that opportunity. And with that, I'll yield back to the gentleman from Colorado to continue this conversation.
Well, I thank the gentleman from New York, and you bring up some great points in terms of what the American people are facing. And when they look at Congress and see the number of bills that we have passed with bipartisan support to create jobs, they see them passing the House, bipartisan support, going over to the Senate, asking where are the jobs, right over in the U.S. Senate. And I'll share with you some of the uncertainty that our constituents are facing. Consumer confidence has plunged. A measure of Americans' optimism about the economy and their personal financial situations recently dropped to its lowest level in 2.5 years during October. CBS News had a poll this past month. Americans say they feel worse about the economy than they have since the depths of the Great Recession. The Great Recession that we are in now. The fact that Americans feel worse about this time than they did about the Great Depression is simply unacceptable. And we have addressed legislation. We have passed legislation to deal with the uncertainty, to put people back to work. And I know one of the people who have worked, one of the ladies who's worked very hard in this House to get people back to work, of course, has the gentlelady from Washington, and would yield time to the gentlelady from Washington.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So, you know, we're all here tonight because we really believe that America is the greatest country on the face of the earth. And it is so because of her people. Folks at home in my neck of the woods in Southwest Washington are out of work. I can go through the statistics. It's alarming. It's very alarming. I have family and close friends who've been out of work now going on several years. Double-digit unemployment. And we've been at this rate for 3, going on 4 years now. I had a jobs fair a couple of weeks ago. We invited employers who are hiring real jobs, good jobs, to come, and we got them in a room with job seekers, and we put out a kind of an all hands on deck. Anybody who's looking for a job, we have real job openings available. Come to this jobs fair. We had over 1,700 people show up. And as I walked through the line that snaked through the parking lot to say hello and to greet these folks, I was talking to men and women, young and old, very experienced or fresh out of high school or college, who were looking to find work, experienced individuals who had that look on their face of, some of them, desperation. And they're asking, what is Congress going to do? What is Congress going to do to help me find work, to keep my mortgage, to pay for my kids' education, to put food on the table? What are you going to do? Well, we're here tonight to talk about some of the things we've already done. And right now what we're doing, we want to put pressure on the other side of the rotunda to pass these bills and get some jobs flowing for the folks who stood in that parking lot. Well, that event was a success. We've had over 30 people find work, and we've had hundreds more who are in interviews. Great. I did that because I didn't believe you could wait on an act of Congress. And watching those individuals who are on the other side of the rotunda who haven't passed any of these jobs bills, it seemed like a good idea. But here tonight, we're applying appropriate pressure to that group, saying, pass these bills. Let me talk to you about one of these bills that will make a huge difference for people across this nation. It's called the EPA Regulatory Relief Act. It's a simple bill. It's a very bipartisan bill. And let me tell you about this bill. And you know, people throw around that word bipartisan. What does that mean? It means strong support from Republicans and Democrats. I'm going to read for you, right here is H.R. 2250. That's the bill that we passed off this House floor. These are all of the folks, my friends from the other side of the aisle. Here are the Democrats in the House who have sponsored this bill. We have folks in leadership. We have newer members. They have joined with the Republican House here and passed a bill, the EPA Regulatory Relief Act, that the Senate must take up if we are going to protect these jobs. These jobs have to do, in fact, they hit all sorts of industries. There's a rule that the Obama administration's EPA has put forward that says business, industry, hospitals, anybody that has a type of boiler, you have to put millions, in some cases, millions of dollars into this boiler to bring it up to some standard. That standard hasn't been clearly defined, and actually the EPA itself has asked and said, can we take a little bit more time to figure out what we're requiring of folks before we require major capital investments that could otherwise be used to hire someone or to increase productivity in a business to create more jobs. But what's happening is these businesses are now going to be required to put this money into an expenditure to bring this boiler up to some code that we can't prove has any environmental benefit, which is why you see so many folks who are advocates for the environment who have co-sponsored this bill in the House. We need the Senate to pass this bill. Otherwise, we could lose potentially over 20,000 jobs nationwide. And that's in the primary pulp and paper industry alone. I'm not talking about hospitals. I'm not talking about other industries. In the primary pulp and paper industry, of which in Southwest Washington we value, that's 18% of that workforce. At a time when we need to be creating jobs, we certainly shouldn't. We should be getting rid of those regulations that cost us jobs. The way we do that is we get the Senate to join with us and pass this bill, get it to the President's desk, get that man to sign that bill, and move forward for the people in our communities. You know, the EPA, the Obama administration's EPA alone has estimated that that bill or that regulation, if untouched, will cost employers over almost $6 billion, and that's the low-end number. The industries have said it'll be as high as $14 billion. Any way you look at it, that's a high price tag that's going to cost jobs. Over 230,000 total jobs are at risk if you count the related industries, not just pulp and paper. So we're talking about major impacts to our national economy, and all we have to do to protect those jobs is we need to pass this bill off the Senate floor, get it to the President, and get him to sign it into law. You know, we really don't have time to wait. I have talked to the men and women, the moms and dads, the young people who are hoping to find work. And when we let some of our industry just go out, basically die, death by 1,000 cuts, death by 1,000 regulations, shame on this institution. Congress does need to act. And I implore my colleagues on the other side of the rotunda to join with us in this bipartisan fashion, send this bill to the President, and have the President sign it.
Will the gentlelady yield?
Absolutely.
I just want to say to all of our colleagues on the floor tonight, it's so important to the gentlelady from Washington not to wait, that she's spending her birthday night on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives fighting for the American people. So happy birthday to our friend and colleague.
Thank you. And with
I yield
that,
back.
I yield back.
Well, and thank you for the points that you raised. I think talking about the EPA and the regulations they've issued, I had the opportunity at a committee hearing several months ago, the Energy and Commerce Committee, to discuss with the Assistant Administrator of the EPA, one of the Assistant Administrators, Matthew Stanislaus, where we were asking a very simple question. Does the Environmental Protection Agency actually take into account jobs, the impact on jobs, when they do an economic analysis? And the answer we got was no, that he didn't take into account jobs when they did the economic analysis. And I find it hard to believe that anybody could actually have an adequate analysis of a rule or regulation's impact on the economy if they're not even taking a look at jobs and what it means for our economy.
Yeah, and with that, really quick, will the gentleman yield?
Yeah, absolutely.
With that point, we're not saying let's erase or eviscerate environmental protections. Absolutely not. We want to protect our quality of life and pass it on to the next generation. We're simply asking, as with our Democratic colleagues, for some common sense to be used. Take into account when you're going through the matrix of these regulations, these environmental regulations, what the impact is on the economy. It's a very reasonable, very common sense way to approach it.
I thank the lady from Washington and yield to the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman from Colorado. You know what's amazing about those Forgotten 15? You know how much they cost? Nothing. I mean, isn't that great? I mean, when you think about it, we're talking about something out of Washington, D.C. It doesn't cost anything. It's actually going to do something. I mean, how often does that happen? Well, if you look a couple of years prior, or actually I guess a year ago, 4 years prior, everything that came out of here cost a lot of money. The President's own stimulus bill, as was mentioned earlier, when they said unemployment will never go above 8% if we pass it, it in fact has never gone below 8% since it was passed, and that cost almost $1 trillion added onto our debt. And I actually remember once I was doing an interview, and there was a fellow congresswoman from the other side that was a Democrat that said, well, you know, the problem with the first stimulus is it wasn't large enough. That's why it didn't work. It wasn't large enough. Okay, I disagree, but, you know, let's, for a moment of time, let's say that's accurate, okay? Let's say it wasn't large enough. So why would you do a stimulus that's half as large as the original one? Truthfully, to be honest with you guys, I think that the President has no intention of his jobs plan, his stimulus 2, passing the House of Representatives. And in fact, I think if we actually voted on it and passed it tomorrow, there'd be some panic in the administration because they know that's not going to be a job creation plan. They know it's just a political thing to talk about. This is a real job creation plan right here, the bills that we have over in the Senate. And it's time that today we just, I mean, look, Senator Reid, take up the bills, vote them down if you want to vote them down, but give the American people a voice. They can't have a voice when they sit on your desk. You don't have a voice when they sit on your desk. We don't need another $450 billion added onto our debt. What we need is to pass these bills in this plan. So with that, I just want to say thank you, and I yield.
Thank the gentleman from Illinois, and I know my neighbor in Colorado, the gentleman from Kansas, has done tremendous work on getting this country back economically and what he's doing to create jobs, and I yield to the gentleman from Kansas.
Well, I appreciate the gentleman from Colorado for yielding your time, and I was listening to the comments from the gentleman from Illinois discussing the unemployment rate being over 8% now for some time. In fact, it's been over 8% for 32 months, which is the longest period of unemployment this high since the Great Depression. It means something we're doing, the things we're doing in Washington, D.C., frankly, haven't been working. And so it's time to start pushing the types of bills that the House has been pushing this year to try to get this economy back on track. And I'm happy to join my colleagues tonight. I'm also happy to be a strong supporter of the Forgotten 15 and the new 7 bills. Dozens of bills are passing the House throughout this session that will help the economy recover, help small businesses create jobs. Now, Americans are frustrated with what they see going on in Congress, what they see going on in Washington, D.C., and there's a reason. Because they see the policies that have failed in this town over the past few years, and they don't believe that Washington can function and they can do things to help the economy recover. And that's because we've been doing all the wrong things, whether it was the bailouts, stimulus bills, cash for clunkers, the health care takeover, cap and trade, card check. You couldn't think of a more anti-business set of legislation that this Congress passed over the last few years than those bills. And what they did is they've held down the recovery and they've stopped small business owners, they've stopped entrepreneurs from growing and creating jobs. I mean, frankly, we know that jobs are not going to be created in Washington, D.C. They're going to be created back home in places like Illinois and in Colorado and in Kansas and in Alabama and, yes, even Wisconsin, all across the country, by innovators and job creators and entrepreneurs, the people that build this country and that create the jobs. They're not going to come from big Washington programs, and that's what has caused the problems in this country. These big Washington bailouts, run up national debt, all of it has not worked. And so it's time we change course. It's time we start pushing legislation that will promote small businesses, that will promote the free enterprise system. And frankly, these things are common sense. The American people, they want Congress to pass common sense legislation.
Will the gentleman suspend? The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate passed S. 1487, cited as the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Business Travel Cards Act of 2011, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
Gentleman may proceed.
The point about these common sense bills that the House is pushing, these pro-business, pro-job creating bills that the House has been pushing and sending over to the Senate, is that they focus on the very things that built this country in the first place. This nation was not built because we had a huge, the highest tax rates in the world, because we had more regulations than any country in the world, because we had national debt in the trillions. That's not what built this country. It was the hard work and the determination, the sweat equity of the American people who had no guarantees, who built this country brick by brick. And the common sense things that Congress doesn't do, that they've been doing, going the wrong way for years. Look, tax increases don't create jobs. Borrowing and spending doesn't create wealth, doesn't create jobs. Regulations don't create jobs. And so every day in Washington we're putting more barriers in the way of these small business owners that we want to have create jobs, and it's making things worse. In fact, just looking at the regulations that are coming out every week out of Washington, it's unbelievable. This is just a stack of the regulations that have come out just this week in Washington, D.C. Monday, new set of regulations. Tuesday, new set of regulations. Wednesday, new set of regulations. That one was pretty thick there. Thursday, another set of regulations. Just this week, these regulations, I mean, they just don't stop. It just keeps coming and coming and hitting our small business owners and helping and stopping the economy from recovering. Let me just give you an example. On Wednesday, what these regulations have, on Wednesday alone, 188 pages of new regulations dealing with the health care takeover. Is that what the economy needs? Is that what you hear from your small business owners at home? Is that what Americans are crying out for? 188 new pages of regulations dealing with health care? It's got to stop. And yes, to the President, we can wait on having new regulations. We can wait on the President's big tax increases. We can wait on this stuff. We don't need 188 new pages of Obamacare regulations. We don't need this new stack of regulations this week. It's not helping the economy recover. It's making it more difficult, and that's why I'm proud to stand with my colleagues today on the House floor and fight for the American people and fight for the prosperity of this country that we all believe in. And we know we can restore it, but we've got to stop doing the stuff in Washington that's making it harder to recover.
I have a question for the gentleman, if you would entertain it. You're talking about what you're holding in your hand that is this week. That's just 1 week, 1 day of regulations?
These are the regulations that have come out since Monday. So you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the regulations. These didn't create jobs. These made it harder on the economy every day. In fact, I think there's been over 65,000 new pages of regulations coming out of Washington, D.C. And frankly, the gentleman from Colorado, people at home, they hear us talking about the regulations, but they may not always see and understand what Washington's actually doing. This is what we're doing to the job creators. This is what we're doing to the entrepreneurs of this country. We are strangling them, and these regulations are making what was once the most prosperous nation in the world, that was a beacon of hope from around the world that we all still believe in, it's trying to strangle that, and we've got to stop it.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Kansas, and one of the most common things I hear at town meetings, the issue of uncertainty in our economy, and the issue that regulations are forcing businesses to make decisions not to hire new people, but to actually either stay and prevent from growing, or to actually reduce in size. And so with that, I would yield to the gentleman from Illinois.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I still am just thinking about the regulations from this week, and the week's not over. We still got another day of regulations that are going to be coming out. And we hear time and again from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle that it's been 10 months and still no jobs bill. We hear it time and again when the one-minute speeches and we open up session, the other side say still no jobs bill. Well, I beg to differ. We've got jobs bills. We talk about the forgotten 15. We've got several more. We passed some tonight. Part of our plan is to empower the private sector. Part of our plan is to make sure that we're eliminating some of the uncertainty that's out there. And let me just tell you, the week of regulations, just 1 week of regulations that are out here that literally shakes the desk when you drop it, is certainly not creating more certainty. Now, the one thing that I am pleased to say is that I believe that we were sent here to be able to work with those on the other side of the aisle to move our country forward. I am pleased to say that we passed bills today talking about access to capital for job creators, like many of us here have come in from the private sector, broad bipartisan support. The President of the United States came and spoke before the chamber here in a joint session talking about a jobs plan. As opposed to saying, no, I don't want it, what I intend and tried to talk to others about, and I know many agree, is what are the areas that we agree on? Talk about free trade or the trade agreements. We agree. We passed those. It's going to talk about 250,000 American jobs, increasing our bottom line in terms of our GDP by $10 billion this year alone, with South Korea as the only one. We had Colombia and Panama, and that number obviously rises. The President talks about the burdensome regulations. We agree. We need to make sure we have regulations, as the gentlelady from Washington noted. We want them to be smart regulations, not just more of them. I mean, my goodness, how much does it cost us to even print these? Long and the short of it is that we need to create an environment. We need to create an environment for the private sector out there with broad bipartisan support, and I believe that if we ask those on the other side of the aisle, what's the biggest issue facing our country today? It's jobs in the economy. We just have a different view of who should be creating those jobs. I believe it should be the private sector. I believe the private sector, entrepreneurship, the United States of America has been and continues to be the greatest force for hope the world has ever known. We have 29 million small businesses in our nation. If we can create an environment where half of them can create a single job, think about where we'd be then. Let's just take a look at this, because these are some bold points. And I think, if I ask the gentleman from Illinois to talk to me about empowering small businesses and reducing government barriers to job creation, I guarantee you he can give me a couple of things that we're doing right now here in this Congress. If I talk to the gentleman from Colorado about fixing the tax code to help job creators, I know that he'd come up with some things because we've already done it. We passed a budget. We're at 918 days in the United States Senate. 918 days and still no budget. Yet the law requires the Congress to come up with a budget every April 15th. And yet, that responsibility, by the way, it's against the law, has been shirked by the United States Senate. We're going to hear more about this do-nothing Congress, and I want to make sure that the American public knows that we are here passing what we believe is common-sense legislation in a bipartisan fashion to move the country forward. We realize that unless things pass the United States Senate and go to the President's desk for signature, we're not going to be able to move the needle. The American public is frustrated. We're frustrated too, because I believe that the American dream is at stake. The American compact that we all came to Congress to deal with, that we leave the country better for the next generation than we received from our parents and grandparents, I believe is in jeopardy today. That, to me, is completely unacceptable.
Will the gentleman yield?
Absolutely.
I'd just like to say, I had asked for the totals. I didn't have them written down. But you take the kind of bipartisan support that you're talking about that we received on the two bills that we passed just today, the access to capital and the access for entrepreneurs. You take that kind of bipartisan support. The American people are frustrated because the President is calling this the Republican Congress. This is a bicameral Congress, and whereas we hold the majority in this House, we don't in the Senate. But you saw the actions that took place on the floor tonight. The first one passed 407 to 17. The second bill passed 413 to 11. There is a way to find common ground without compromising principle. And that is what we are doing, because the American people are hurting, and we've got to create that environment, and we have by passing these bills, and we are calling on those in the Senate to see our bipartisanship in this House to get Americans back to work.
And I thank the gentlewoman for commenting on that. There's no doubt. Look, bipartisanship can be done. The American public is frustrated because they don't think that we're working, and in some instances, you know, we know that Washington can be broken. We want to work together because we know we've got to move the ball down the field. We know we've got to get people back to work. We've got a 9.1% unemployment. What's it in Wisconsin?
About 9%.
About 9%. In Illinois, it's at 10%. In certain areas of the 10th District, in Illinois, we've got areas of 20 to 22%. I can tell you that jobs right now, absolutely #1 priority. And that's why I'm willing to work with anybody here in Washington that's willing to listen, that's willing to reach across the aisle, to come up with solutions. And I want to let you know, if people are saying that we don't have a plan, we've got a plan. Jobs.gop.gov. I welcome everybody to be able to go get it, and I'll yield back.
Well, and I want to thank the gentleman from Illinois for his comments, because when he started talking tonight, he talked about his great hope and optimism for this country, the fact that we really do live in the greatest nation on the face of this earth, but we face tremendous challenges. The unemployment that you listed, that you spoke about for your state, the unemployment in Wisconsin, the unemployment levels in Colorado and across this country are significant. 14 million people who are out of work, and if you start looking at the people who are underemployed or who have simply given up work, looking for work, that number increases even more. And I want to share with you something that I think is very difficult for all of us to realize is happening, and that's the fact that there's more fear about our future than many other times in our history. According to a newspaper recent account, a resounding 69% of respondents said the country is in decline. But yet we know this country is better. We know this country is great. We know that the bills that we have passed, the leadership that we have provided, will restore the greatness of this country and get this country working again. And I have worked with my colleague from Colorado for many years in the state legislature. He's a small businessman, somebody who knows how to sign a check to employees, to work under regulations that he has had to deal with, and in the state legislature stood up for jobs, and I know he's doing the same thing here, and I would yield to my colleague from western Colorado and thank the gentleman for being here tonight.
You know, I thank the gentleman for yielding. You know, we talk about unemployment in this country. Over 8%, 9.1% nationally. Let me tell you the story in my district in Colorado, two largest communities. 10.7% unemployment in Pueblo, Colorado. 10.5% in Grand Junction, Colorado. I have 29 counties in Colorado. We have one county that has higher than 17% unemployment. There's a lot of discussion on this floor in Washington, D.C. about jobs and the economy, and it's well placed. We talk about businesses, but what we often forget to remember, that these businesses are made up of moms and dads, grandparents, people with hopes, with dreams for a better future. These are the employers, the people who make America work, working together in business. Let me tell you a story about a man named Jim Bartmus in Pueblo, Colorado. Just about a month ago, Mr. Bartmus, who was a contractor, was faced with a real dilemma. Just a few years ago, he qualified under the President's definition as wealthy, a small contractor. That wealth he reinvested back into his business to try and grow it, to try and create more jobs in this country. Mr. Bartmus made that investment. He paid down his line of credit to zero. When he went to the bank to be able to re-up that line of credit, to be able to keep that business going, to keep his 24 core employees at work, he discovered that because of regulations, because of Dodd-Frank, that he couldn't get that line of credit re-upped once again. As a result, Mr. Bartmus lined up his equipment, auctioned it off. And when you talk to a grizzled contractor and you hear his voice crack as he had to describe how he laid off 24 people that we call employees, he called family, you know this hits America at home. As I travel throughout my district and as I know my colleagues travel throughout the rest of the country, we hear the same lament from small business, from the #1 job creators in this country. They're overregulated. They're worried about that pile of regulations that we see dropped upon the desk on a weekly basis. Being able to have access to capital. What is that tax rate going to actually be? What is the President's health care plan actually going to cost? Those are the questions that they raise and why they are afraid to invest. Well, if we will unleash American entrepreneurialism once again, if we will create that certainty for Americans to do what we do better than any people on the face of the earth, that's to create, to innovate, to build, we can get this American economy moving. You know, my colleague from Colorado and I have discussed oftentimes there's something very unique about being an American. The very blood that courses through our veins is infused with something that people from around the world simply can't understand. We don't look for government to be the answer. We don't look for a government program. We want the freedom and the ability to be able to build our own future. Government should not be a stumbling block to that success, but a stepping stone. And in this case, it means the government get out of American businesses' way, the American employees' way, and let us do what we do best, get America back to work. I yield back.
And I thank the gentleman from Colorado. I was speaking to a pharmacist the other day. You mentioned regulations, the issue of regulations, what it's doing to business, and they actually wanted to create a little different business model for their pharmacy by placing a pharmacist instead of behind the counter within the pharmacy. They wanted to move them up in front of the counter, so as customers came in, they could go and talk to the pharmacist about what they needed help with. They actually had to change a regulation to allow that pharmacist to sit in front of the counter instead of behind the counter. And I know the gentleman from Wisconsin has been working hard to create jobs as well, and I would yield to the gentleman from Wisconsin.
I appreciate the gentleman from Colorado yielding, and I commend my colleagues for your hard work and the focus that you have all had on jobs and job creation and legislation that's actually going to help move our economy forward. And, you know, I think we're in a unique time in American history. If you look at where we're at and the level of competition that we are under from countries like China, India, Mexico, Vietnam, Brazil, this is a whole new environment that we haven't seen before. It's not 1950, not 1980, it's not even the 1990s. This is a different form of competition. And if we're going to be successful in this new environment, we have to do it right. Because if we get it wrong, you see massive unemployment. And as we came into this recession, I think the American people said to the President, we are willing to go along with you, Mr. President, if you tell us that we could spend $1 trillion, and from that you can take the pain away, you can create jobs with that kind of spending. If you tell us that we can pass a health care bill, and that's going to help create jobs, we can pass more regulation, and that's going to create jobs, okay, Mr. President, we'll go along with you because the pain is too great. When one of my family members is out of work and I see the pain and suffering in their family, it's worth it, Mr. President. I'll go with you. Now, this is a path that we haven't traditionally gone down because we're an economy. We're a society of free markets and free enterprise where we look to the individual who invests, works hard, innovates, and creates wealth, creates opportunity, creates jobs in their community. But we were willing to go for a while and say, let's try it out, Mr. President. A couple years down the road, we now look back and say, where are we? Are we better off today than we were 2.5, 3 years ago? And I think if you ask the American people, they will give you a resounding no, we're not. And so what we're doing here today is saying, let's go back to our great history. Let's go back to our roots of free markets. Let's try to streamline the regulatory process that this government has given the private sector. Let's make sure we free the American people, we free the entrepreneurial spirit, and if we do that, and we engage in this new competitive environment against China, India, Mexico, I don't care who it is. If you set the American free, we will compete, we will win, we will thrive, we will grow, and we will prosper. And that's why we in this House have passed bills with bipartisan support that advocate for free markets. And listen, some people come at us and say, you don't want regulation. Well, that's not true. We want smart regulation. They say, listen, the tax code needs to be reformed. And we'll say, yes, absolutely it needs to be reformed. We want to make sure that there aren't loopholes that don't make big corporations and big industry and the wealthy not pay their fair share. We were the first ones. We were the first ones in Washington to say, let's root out the loopholes. That was in our budget that we said, let's root it out. And it was only after we did it that we see the President come out and say he wanted to follow. And I will tell him that I'm a willing partner to join him in tax reform. And I think as we look at what's happened here, we've sent, I think that one of the members here said we've sent over 22 bills to the Senate. And with that, the Senate hasn't taken up any of them. And as the gentleman from Illinois noted, at least the Senate should take them up and give them a vote. And if they want to vote them down, that's okay. But at least take them up and give them a vote. They took the President's bill up, gave it a vote, and a bipartisan effort, it failed. And so my point to my colleagues and to the American people is that if we are going to move our economy forward, we have to tap in to the principles and the ideals that made this country great. That's what this freshman class is talking about tonight. That's what we've been talking about for the last 10 months. I look forward to the work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. As you might notice, I'm on the left side here. I'm on the Democrat side of the aisle. I'm willing to work with my friends on both sides. But let's get it done. Let's not do it for a party. Let's do it for the American people, putting them back to work. With that, I'd yield back to the gentleman from Colorado.
Well, I thank you, and I'd be curious to hear from my colleagues tonight. I haven't, over the 55 town meetings that I have held, I've never heard somebody come up to me and say, hey, when's the government going to start creating all these jobs to replace 15 million unemployed, to give them jobs, 15 million unemployed? And I don't know if you're hearing the same thing.
Well, I get asked the question, or I did early on, what is the most shocking thing in your experience in Washington? And I unequivocally can say the most shocking part of this experience of representing Alabama's 2nd District is really beginning to understand how huge this government is, how the federal government right now, today, trickles down into every crevice of our lives. And to go with the gentleman from Wisconsin's remarks, we are trying to get government out of the way and allow the private sector to thrive. And we don't have people coming up to us at our town hall saying, when are you going to pass more regulations?
Well, I'm sure the gentleman from Illinois is hearing the same or not hearing the same thing.
Well, what's amazing to me is we've conditioned, Republicans and Democrats, not we. We've only been here less than a year. But the American people have been so conditioned to believe that if there's any difficulty, the answer is a giant government expenditure package. A giant bill with a lot of money spent. We've been conditioned to believe that. So if the economy's bad, it obviously is because the government's not spending enough. Well, that's not true. The reality is we built this country, and this is what I hear from people. We built this country based on people just having an idea and going out and getting it done. That's what we're talking about, that idea.
And again, I mean, the statistics speak for themselves. 2 million people, the number of net jobs the economy shed from February 2009 when the stimulus was passed. And are you hearing the same thing in the great state of Washington?
Absolutely. And here's an important point. You know, we as Republicans understand that the federal government has responsibilities and duties, right? Security, our nation's infrastructure. There are certain things we're responsible for. We're not against those things. We just think they need to be done in a smart and efficient fashion. You know, when you look at the last time the stimulus, giant amounts of money were spent before this most recent round of stimulus spending under the Obama economy. The last time we got things out of it like the Hoover Dam, right? We got something for it. Out of the stimulus spending, which was sold primarily as a jobs bill because it was going to create transportation infrastructure, less than 7% of that $800 billion stimulus bill actually went to transportation infrastructure. So it's not that Republicans don't support making sure those things take place. We're here to require some accountability. We're not going to throw money at it and hope that that works. We recognize there's something broken here in Washington. We have now passed well over 15 bills to get jobs growing, to fix that thing that's broken, and we just need some help from folks on the other side of the rotunda.
And I would just say this, too. I think the American people ought to be begging the question to the Senate as it relates to the tardy 22 bills that they have sitting over there on their side that we know will create jobs. They need to ask them specifically, their senators, why are you opposed to this? What is your sound objective? What is your reasoning? We want to create jobs. We're out of work. You know, earlier I said another word for forgotten because the forgotten 15 has slipped our minds. It just slipped our minds. We need to remind these senators over there, all Americans do, they need to pick up the phone and they say, what's your opposition to these 22 bills that will create jobs and put America back driving economy once more?
And the America's job creators, the plan that we have come up with to get this economy moving forward again, they're embodied in the Forgotten 15, the other bills that we have passed to join the Forgotten 15 that are piling up in the United States Senate. All these bills with the simple goal, empowering small businesses and reducing government barriers to job creation, fix the tax code to help job creators. Nobody opposes these ideas. Nobody opposes these ideas. If you go to Americans around this country and ask them, should we be encouraging entrepreneurship and growth, they're going to say yes, and that's exactly what these bills do. And I would, I'm sure that you're hearing the same thing in your meetings.
The private sector is sitting on trillions of dollars. I mean, we know that. The money is there to jumpstart our economy, but because of all this uncertainty, no one's spending these dollars to reinvest in their private businesses.
Yeah, and how many times, are we going to be, how many times is Washington going to be dishonest with us and just say, well, the answer is, I know it didn't work in the past, it's going to work this time. The President himself said, hey, the shovel-ready jobs, chuckle, chuckle, weren't so shovel-ready after all. Well, it's fine. You know what? It's because it doesn't work. This plan right here, this will work. The American people is our jobs recovery plan. The American people doing what they can do best. That's the recovery plan. It's not another $500 billion.
And getting the government out of the way so that they can thrive.
Absolutely. And I think for those who, Mr. Speaker and those controlling this time, it's important to recognize if you want more details about these jobs, the Forgotten 15, jobs.gop.gov is a good place to go if you want to pick up the phone, call your senators. There's the Reducing Regulatory Burdens Act. There's the EPA regulation bill. There are several more bills that the other side needs to hear from the folks at home on. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and yield back to the gentleman from Colorado who's leading our time.
Well, I want to thank everybody for participating in tonight's discussion about our plan for jobs, about what we're going to do to get this country back to work. 32 months, this country's faced unemployment over 8%. And I want to share a story that happened just a couple of weeks ago when I had the opportunity to sit down with some employers around the state of Colorado. We were in a restaurant and had the opportunity to discuss what regulations are doing to our economy, over-regulations as mentioned here tonight. We all believe in smart regulations, those regulations that make sense but aren't overly burdensome to job creators. And as we had this conversation, we talked about what burden we were placing on future generations, the high unemployment rate, 14 million people who are out of work, and what we were going to do to help America's working families make ends meet once again. And we had a waitress who was coming in and helping everybody, taking orders and working very hard that morning. And after we were done, we walked out, and the conversations were going, and I was the last one to leave this meeting. And just then, the waitress who was working in that room came up to me, grabbed me by the shoulder, and she said, "Hey, I liked what you guys were talking about, because this is my second job. This isn't my only job. I'm trying to start a business. And I'm trying to work here while that business gets off the ground, while we're trying to make ends meet so that I can get that business going, and I'm trying to work here. But what you talked about, the regulations that are hurting businesses, the taxes that are making an uncompetitive advantage for people right here, that's hurting her ability to get her job going, and there she is working a second job. And there are people out there with third jobs trying to make ends meet. And I want to thank everybody for participating tonight, and encourage the visit to people who may be interested in the Republican jobs plan to visit jobs.gop.gov, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The chair will receive a message.
Message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has passed S. 1759, cited as the America's Cup Act of 2011, in which the concurrence of the House is requested.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for recognizing me for this hour. I'm going to speak for a time, and then I'm going to yield my time to Mr. Jackson, who has an important message. But I would like to start by just talking to the American people about the progressive message. You can sit on this. You can sit on your television set and you can watch this broadcast. And for the last hour, what you would have heard as people claiming that you can get jobs by just taking away our health and safety rules, by just getting rid of regulation. Magically, we're going to get jobs. Well, we have had the Clean Air Act in place since the early 70s, and we have seen record job growth in the 1990s, and we have seen the Bush era, when the Republicans had the House, they had the Senate, and they had the White House, the lowest job era of modern memory. They've tried it their way, and they got us into this mess. Never forget that it was in January 2009 when this country would lost 741,000 jobs in that month alone, and the Democrats and President Obama have been building back ever since. I want to say that the progressive message is about talking about the antidote to that line of argumentation, that the rich don't have enough money, that the poor have too much, that asking our American corporations to look after health and safety laws is too much of a burden, that we have to sacrifice our lungs so that some multinational can make even more money. No, no, no. The progressive message is where we stand up for small business people, where we talk about the right to organize on the job, where we get into the conversation of civil rights and human rights, where we talk about peace at home and abroad, and where we talk about the importance of protecting our environment. I want to welcome Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who's just joined me for the moment. She's here, and great member from Texas. Thank you for joining me with the progressive message. I'm going to yield to you, Congresswoman.
Well, I'm delighted to join my friend, colleague from the great state of Minnesota, and the distinguished co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, of which I have the privilege of serving as a vice chair. And I truly want to say to our colleagues, the Progressive Caucus has been on the mark, and in fact stays on a pattern, frankly, that should draw good-thinking, well-intentioned Americans from both sides of the aisle. Let me recount for my co-chair the number of job fairs and summits that we had. We have not yet finished. We'll probably go into 2012. But I wanted to just focus on a couple of points that I believe has been the progressive message. It is the Good Samaritan message, the secular Good Samaritan message, that we're all in this together. It is to recognize that the nation is not so broke, or it is not broke, that it cannot help the most vulnerable. In a super committee hearing, it was delineated by the head of the OMB that actually, Mr. Ellison, that our debt deficit is 8.5% of gross domestic product. That means that 92% is rolling along, not the way we would like it, but it is rolling along. And if we took a family's budget and they said, you know what, we have less than 10% debt, we got 100%, but 10% debt, let's work to diminish that debt, but let me not stop feeding the 3 children. Right. Let me not stop paying the mortgage, if that was the ratio of our debt. And I think it is important for the progressive message that we are saying is that there are ways of pulling us up by our bootstraps. One, we can close our eyes, and in a moment, the Bush tax cuts can expire, and we will generate billions of dollars that will help promote jobs. We can pass the Jobs Act that really focus on infrastructure, providing for our veterans, small businesses, and in fact creating the millions of jobs that we can generate out of that particular legislation. We can eliminate discrimination of the chronically unemployed, and we can give a $4,000 tax credit to employers for hiring, as I indicated, the long-term unemployed. Are we remembering that on December 31st, 2011, we will be bringing home, or by that time our President has said that soldiers from Iraq will come home. That is an immediate infusion of dollars back into our bank account, although we must be able to protect our soldiers who are coming home and provide for them. We have on the horizon, Mr. Chairman, and I know that all who are listening are excited about the fact, an omnibus jobs bill that is about to come forward from the Progressive Caucus. But the only reason I just say, without giving the details of it, is we found a way to pay for creating jobs and answering the clarion call of the American people. So I believe the progressive message is the secular Good Samaritan, that we cannot leave the vulnerable along the streets and highways of despair. We must be able to ensure that we are looking out for those who cannot look out for themselves. I finish on these 2 points. The super committee is doing the very best that it can do. I am grateful that we will be opening opportunities for our own hearing in the coming week. But there is a dilemma, and that dilemma is that there is a certain amount of the vulnerable needs of America that are protected, but there are some that are exposed. And what that means is that we will be looking in the face of America in 2012, looking back in our rearview mirror, and we will see along the highway of life the despair that have been left out by the draconian cuts that have to come because we've raised no revenue. That is a crisis. And if I might do a personal moment on my final closure, if we have states like the state of Texas that are in essence with elected officials who have in-head rocks, and I'm coming to my closure so you can understand how I prioritize what we should be doing. The N-word rock. We've got states. I come from that state. I'm ashamed of that description, proud to make it known on the floor of the House. Or we have state agencies that we fund. The Texas Motor Vehicle Board, the state of Texas get federal funds, was about to issue a Confederate plate, license plate, issued by the state of Texas on November 10th. I will be in Austin to oppose it. But the reason why I say that is, if we have time to deal with these negatives, do we not have the time to galvanize states and representatives and governors to focus on the most vulnerable? Don't we have time to call for the voices to be raised, to be able to give encouragement to the super committee, encouragement to those who are not willing to raise revenue, that the better way for America is to take that 8.5% debt deficit opposed to the GDP, boost the GDP, build, rebuild, create jobs for small businesses. Let's steer ourselves away from negative Confederate flags and in-head and get all of the states to work together, Democrats and Republicans, to follow the progressive message, which is liberty and justice for all and opportunity for all. I thank the gentleman for allowing me to yield to him on this occasion.
Let me take the gentlelady, and then in about 2 minutes I'm going to hand it, yield to my good friend from Illinois, Jesse Jackson. But I do want to say that as you talk about the least of thee, we're talking about poor folks who need some home heating oil.
That's right.
Children who need Head Start, right? We're talking about people who need the SNAP program, the food stamp program. We're talking about students who need some help to afford a college education. And my question is, will the rich and the wealthy and the well-to-do of America pay a little bit more to help this happen? Bank of America didn't pay a single penny in federal income tax in 2009. Boeing, despite receiving billions of dollars in federal government every single year in taxpayer money, Boeing didn't pay a dime in U.S. federal corporate income tax between 2008 and 2010. Citigroup's deferred income taxes for the third quarter of 2010 amounted to a grand total of 0. At the same time, Citigroup is continuing to pay its staff lavishly. John Havens, the head of Citigroup's investment bank, is expected to be the bank's highest paid executive for the second year in a row, with compensation of $9.5 million. ExxonMobil, big oil, Dodgers use offshore subsidies in the Caribbean to avoid paying their fair share. Although ExxonMobil paid $15 billion in taxes in 2009, none of it went to the American Treasury. This is the same year that the company overtook Walmart in the Fortune 500. Meanwhile, a total compensation for ExxonMobil's CEO was about $29 million. Of course, General Electric, 2009, world's largest corporation, filed more than 7,000 tax returns and still paid nothing to America's government. GE has managed to do this with the aid of a rigged tax code that essentially subsidizes companies for losing profits and allows them to be set up tax havens overseas. So let me just say, you know, on behalf of the people who need food stamps, on behalf of the people who need college education, on behalf of the folks who need home heating oil because of cold winters, on behalf of the people who are struggling to make it in America today, will our most privileged Americans do anything? The Progressive Caucus thinks they ought to do something. And so with that, I want to
and before you close, I wanted to just comment on the gentleman. I did not mention him, and I wanted to thank him. We're going to yield to him, and I just want to thank you, Mr. Jackson, for what I know you're about to begin, which is an eloquent presentation on the importance of construction. It looks as if in airports that you've been fighting on for many years, and if we would listen to you on the particular project that you're speaking of, but also as we look to infrastructure around America, we would be able to create what I'm getting ready to see. We'd be able to compete with some of these other nations that he will cite that will have probably more airports than the United States. So I just want to thank you, Mr. Jackson, for your astuteness, and we look forward to hearing you, and thank you for the progressive message.
Thank you, Congressman. And I just want to say, let me yield to the gentleman from Illinois who's going to talk to us about infrastructure. Very important, putting Americans back to work. I yield to the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, will control the remainder of the hour.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire as to how much time I have remaining?
The gentleman has 48 minutes remaining.
I thank the gentlelady from Houston. Mr. Speaker, as many of you know, I've been talking about building a third airport for Chicago's metropolitan area since my first campaign, which is in 1995. The congressional district that I represent has nearly 3 people for every 1 job in many communities. And compare that to the northwest suburban parts of the city of Chicago, there are nearly 3 jobs for every 1 person, an enormous disparity. Since that time in 1995, the United States has not built a single new airport. In fact, the United States has not built a new greenfield airport in more than 40 years. The last totally new airport built in this country was Dallas-Fort Worth, which opened for business in 1969. Now, some of you may say that Denver built a new airport. Well, yes and no. Denver has a new airport, but it was a replacement airport. Once the new Denver International Airport was completed, the old Stapleton Airport was shut down. So while Denver has an updated facility, that airport really didn't add to the number of U.S. airports. Since 1969, when Dallas-Fort Worth opened, the U.S. air traffic, the number of passenger and cargo flights, has more than tripled. Yet despite a tripling of activity and 40-plus years of aviation growth, no new major airport has come online to accommodate that expansion. That's absolutely incredible, Mr. Speaker. Compare our record to China's. The Chinese government recently announced plans to build 97 new airports between 2008 and 2020. So the U.S. builds 0 airports in 42 years. China is embarking on a plan to build 97 new airports in just 12 years. If the United States wants or hopes to stay competitive in the global economy, we need to start thinking a little bit bigger. We need to start thinking about ports and specifically airports. We need to start thinking a little bit more like the Chinese. 100 new airports by 2020. The General Administration of the Civil Aviation of China said that it plans to spend over 450 billion yuan building no fewer than 97 airports by the year 2020. If the plans are carried through, this massive expansion of capacity will see the number of Chinese airports increase to 244. The plans will mean that 8 of every 10 Chinese people will live within 100 kilometers of an airport. If the United States wants to compete, we simply have to be prepared to build more of these facilities. And I'm happy to report that some of us in Washington and in Illinois are doing precisely that. In the past 2 months, I've heard President Barack Obama talk about the need to build new airports. Not once, not twice, but several times I've heard the President say this. The first time when he unveiled his national jobs plan, the President said, and I quote, "We can put people to work rebuilding America. Our highways are clogged with traffic. Our skies are the most congested in the world. It's an outrage." Quote, "Building a world-class transportation system is part of what made us an economic superpower. And now we're going to sit back and watch China build newer airports and faster railroads at a time when millions of unemployed construction workers could build them right here in America," the President said. Mr. Obama even noted that perhaps the best way, and maybe the only way, to build new airports, new highways, new infrastructure is through public-private partnerships, also known as PPP. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I explained this concept to State Senator Barack Obama while he was running to become a United States Senator in 2004. And when he wrote an op-ed in the Chicago Sun-Times in support of this proposed new airport, in his article he said, and I quote, "There is a strong case for a regional third airport in the south suburbs, a region that has struggled economically while other suburban areas have prospered. Employment and income in the south suburbs lags the rest of the Chicago area. The construction and operation of a new airport near Peatone would bring 1,000 construction jobs in the next 2 years and 15,000 permanent jobs by the first full year of operations, as well as billions of dollars in new economic activity to residents and communities that sorely need it." Rep. Jesse Jackson, Jr., a key leader in the Peatone effort, has assembled a group of private investors who are willing to risk their capital on the new airport's prospects. State government's role in the project would be limited to providing infrastructure improvement such as roads, transit, and sewers, which it routinely provides to other development projects around the state. Mr. Obama said, "The benefits of a south suburban airport would not be limited to the Chicago region. Many downstate communities are hampered by their lack of air access to Chicago. Since gates for such flights are extremely limited at O'Hare and Midway, An airport near Peatone would provide downstate communities with enhanced air access to Chicago, as well as accommodating general aviation traffic that formerly utilized Meigs Field. In addition, as the world's first and only airport custom designed, built, and priced to attract low-cost carriers, it will attract air service to the Chicago area by startup and discount airlines currently not operating out of Chicago's existing airports. As many of you know, the plan that I've put together for Chicago's third airport is precisely that. I've advocated for building this airport through a public-private partnership for the past 8 years. To quote President Obama again, he said, "There are private construction companies all across America just waiting to get to work. We'll set up an independent fund to attract private dollars and issue loans based on 2 criteria: how badly a construction project is needed, number 1, and how much good it will do for the economy." The President knows that Chicago's 2 airports, O'Hare and Midway, have been operating at or above capacity for years, so the need is clearly there. In fact, the Federal Aviation Administration has been asking Chicago to build a new airport since 1985, for more than 25 years. As for the President's requirement that new infrastructure be good for the economy, there is no greater job generator in the world than an airport. For proof, we need only look no further than Washington, D.C. and the Dulles Airport Corridor. Once out in the middle of nowhere, the Dulles Airport Corridor today is home to 35,000 new companies. Some 575,000 people go to work there every day, and roughly 57% of the world's internet traffic now flows through the Dulles Corridor. Most of that is possible due to the airport. As for the airport that I'm proposing for Chicago, it would create 1,000 construction jobs immediately over the next 2 years. Once Phase 1 construction is done, which can be done as early as June of next year, and the airport opens for business, it would create an additional 15,000 new permanent jobs for the local economy, again, by the first day of operation. That 15,000 jobs at the airport includes some jobs at the airport, like pilots and baggage handlers and air traffic controllers and service agents and TSA agents. But moreover, Mr. Speaker, it includes jobs located outside of the airport's footprint. I'm talking about jobs at the new Hilton, the new Hyatt, the new Fairmont hotels locating near airports, jobs at UPS and Federal Express, 2 businesses that can't survive without airports, Hertz, Dollar, Alamo, Avis, and Enterprise, jobs at local restaurants, McDonald's and Burger King and Chili's and KFC, Olive Garden, White Castle, Outback Steakhouse, Steak and Shake, Red Lobster, Wendy's, Applebee's, Panera Bread, convention centers, malls with entertainment complexes, sports complexes, warehouses, rail yards, all in the service industry, and corporate headquarters, all of which historically like to locate near airports. Hotels all across America must be at 80% occupancy in order to be profitable every single day. People who stay at hotels tend to get to those hotels by flying there, catching a taxi or taking a taxi from an airport, or even renting a car. Airports are the center of the service-based economy. Expanding the service-based economy is the fastest way to employ the American people and put them, Mr. Speaker, back to work. And just like Dulles, which was Washington's third airport, Chicago's new third airport would create over time hundreds of thousands of new jobs. So how do we build and finance an airport in these tough economic times? I know someone out there in television land is actually asking that question. As the President said, the way to build new airports is through a public-private partnership, by getting private companies to invest their own capital without risk to taxpayers. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I learned a lot about public-private partnerships a dozen years ago when I began researching ways to build and finance a third airport for Chicago. And the President is absolutely correct. I learned right here in the Congress of the United States from my late colleague, Congressman Henry Hyde, who introduced me to a number of consultants who impressed upon us the need to move to public-private partnerships in order to handle the nation's future infrastructure demands. Our research taught me that the old method for financing and building airports is absolutely obsolete. It doesn't work anymore. In short, the paradigm has shifted since 1969, when America built its last major airport. The old model used to work like this. Runways and taxiways were built and financed by cities. A city would then recoup its investment by collecting landing fees from airlines and eventually get paid back over the next 30 years. Under that same old model, terminals were built and financed by the airlines. That's why O'Hare has a United terminal and an American terminal, etc. But guess what? The old model, Mr. Speaker, does not work anymore. Most cities cannot afford to pay for runways and then wait 30 years to get reimbursed. And they're reluctant to hit up taxpayers for more money. Likewise, most airlines, many of whom are teetering on bankruptcy, can no longer afford to invest in and build massive terminal buildings. The new model is the public-private partnership. Under the public-private partnership, cities create airport commissions. They form participating governments who then enter into an intergovernmental agreement. And by entering into that intergovernmental agreement, they form an airport authority with the state which owns land, leases land, or yields land to the airport authority, who then in turn provides that land to the developers. The developers make an investment in the airfield. They build the airport. The income from the airfield comes to the developers, who then pay the public entity rent. And that's how the engine of our economy for a local airport begins to spin. And it continues to spin as the airport begins to grow and begins to manifest itself in the form of productivity for those who take advantage of the facility. If the private sector does it right, they reap profits that can then be shared with the communities that formed the Airport Commission. This model is exactly what has been used at new airport projects around the world for the last 40 years. The main reason this model hasn't been used in the U.S. is simple. During the last 40 years, we haven't built any new airports. In Chicago, we are following the new international model of the public-private partnership. First, we formed a local airport commission to create and oversee the public-private partnership. That commission, formed in 2003, is comprised of 21 municipalities from 3 counties, Cookeville and Kankakee, located near the airport site. These communities, who call themselves the Abraham Lincoln National Airport Commission, or ALNAC, work essentially as one city, and they make up the public side of the partnership. These 21 communities, again, acting as one airport commission, then conducted a global competition to find private developers who had the expertise, the experience, the wherewithal, and the willingness to design, finance, construct, and manage a new airport. 17 companies from around the world ultimately responded to the Commission's requests for proposals. At the conclusion of that global search, ALNAC, the Public Commission, selected 2 companies with aviation expertise, SNC-Lavalin and Elcor, as its private development partners. These 2 companies have built new airports or expanded existing airports in countries from Europe, Africa, North America, from Central America to South America. They've done so with great success, and more importantly, they've done it with their own money, at no cost to the taxpayers. Now, for anyone who is thinking this is just a pie-in-the-sky concept or some airport fantasy, I must say that the governor of Illinois has carefully vetted the ALNAC proposal. Governor Quinn, his lawyers, outside counsel, the Illinois Department of Transportation spent close to a year vetting all of ALNAC's work. In the end, the governor's office found that ALNAC's public-private partnership is legal, is viable, and capable. And I'm proud of what this local commission has done. I'm proud of our private partners who want to invest $700 million in Chicago's new airport. And I'm proud and happy that President Obama and Illinois Governor Quinn have a clear understanding that public-private partnerships are capable, indeed perhaps necessary, in building, financing, and operating world-class airports that will expand the nation's aviation capacity and create jobs without using taxpayer dollars faster than any single thing that this Congress can do. All of us in public life, as well as many leaders in the private sector, are feeling the pressure to create jobs and to rebuild America. Or as the President said, it's time for us to take off our slippers, put on our marching shoes, stop complaining, stop whining. We've got work to do. Now, I want to take a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, to show you just how this plan would work and introduce you to a key concept that makes this financial model better than the one that exists at virtually every U.S. airport in the United States. The concept is called common use gates. It simply means that airlines no longer build terminals, so therefore they can no longer control the gates. Instead, the gates are built and controlled by a private company that has expertise in running airports. For airlines, it means all gates can be used by any airline, and they pay for just the hour or so that they use to unload passengers, reload, and then take off. The common use gate concept, which is used at modern airports everywhere outside the United States, means terminals need less space, which in turn means they cost less money. And ultimately, common use gates should save travelers time and money. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to report that the Abraham Lincoln National Airport Commission, or ALNAC, along with its 21 municipal members and our private developers, have developed a fully vetted, cost-effective plan to update and expand our nation's infrastructure, which costs taxpayers nothing, but will create tens of thousands of jobs. This airport, Mr. Speaker, is bigger than just an airport for my congressional district and for Chicago's Southland. This airport would change the way we build things in the United States and will have national and global significance. This Republican-led Congress hasn't been very helpful to President Obama. In fact, this Congress is determined not to pass a single piece of legislation that will help him put the American people back to work. And since the President is issuing executive orders and looking for other ways to go around this Republican-led and dysfunctional Congress, the beauty of the Jackson Plan to build a third airport in Chicago area is that we don't need Congress or the Illinois legislature to vote on or approve anything. We just need the signature of the governor of Illinois on a land lease. So what I need you to do is call the governor of Illinois, 312-814-2121. That's 312-814-2121. And tell him to lease the land to the Abraham Lincoln National Airport Commission so we can give President Obama a victory and begin to put the American people back to work. Now, I want to take just a little time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire as to how much time I have left?